In front of me are 3 small, affordable, beginner-friendly cameras. And whether you're interested in vlogging, photography, or you want to go full on into content creation, each of these cameras will fit the bill. But not all of these cameras are created equal. So I'm gonna walk through each of them, talk about 3 features that I like and 3 features that I don't like. And by the end of the video, I'll give you some of the standout features that make each of these cameras one that you might want to consider. But let's start with some of the similarities. The big one being the resolution of the sensor. So between 24 and 26 megapixels is what you can expect. If you're gonna shoot photos, that's roughly 4,000 by 6,000 pixels. But if you're doing video, each of these cameras does support 4K UHD up to 60 frames per second. And if you're someone who likes to tweak, to edit, to stylize the look of your video footage, each of these cameras does support video in a log color profile. But not only that, if you are someone who likes to record yourself, each of these cameras does have a fully articulating tilty flippy screen, so you can flip it around and see yourself while you're recording or see yourself while you're vlogging. And each of these cameras does have a mobile app that you can download, that you can put on your smartphone, that you can use to transfer photos, to transfer videos. Now the Lumix, the app that they make is a little bit, it has a few extra features that these ones from Canon and Fujifilm don't, but I'll talk more about that and why you might want to consider it in a little bit. Do keep in mind that because these are entry-level cameras, they do have a single memory card slot, so there's no second memory card slot for backup, but it is an SD card slot, which means your memory cards are gonna be more affordable than if you had to go out and buy expensive CF Express Type B cards or CF Express Type A cards, and chances are you probably already have an SD card lying around that you can use if all you want to do is shoot some photos. Each of these is going to be a significant upgrade from shooting photos or videos on your smartphone. And the main reason that I have these 3 cameras, although they're from different brands, is because this is a rare instance where I have been loaned 3 different cameras from 3 different brands and happen to have them all at the same time. So you might be wondering, like, Anthony, why aren't you recommending the R50 or the R10 or the XT30 or some other camera that's more expensive or less expensive or has different features? Well, this is not gonna be your Canon R1s, your Sony A1s, your Sony A9s. We're talking about some entry-level cameras that I would consider to be affordable, that I would consider to be an upgrade from something like your smartphone. But if there's another camera that you recommend, that you've tried, that you want to see reviewed, let me know down in the comments and I'll see if one of these companies will lend it out to me or if I can get a friend to loan it to me and we can do a review of that camera as well. So by all means, check out the links down in the description below for these cameras, or if you're looking for something that's a little bit more serious, or if you want to know what I'm recording on, I'll put links down below for those cameras and those lenses as well. So let's jump right in and talk about the advantages of the first camera on our list, which happens to be the smallest, the lightest, and the most affordable, the Fujifilm X-M5. All right, 3 features about the Fujifilm X-M5 that I think are great. Feature number 1, the reason you probably clicked on this video is that it is such a small camera. Coming from the Canon ecosystem, the R50 and the R10, which are kind of the smallest cameras that they make, those cameras still have a viewfinder, which means if you're trying to get something that's compact, those cameras are always going to be limited because they have a viewfinder. Fujifilm, whether or not you like it, removed the viewfinder and really made this one of the smallest cameras that I've ever used, probably the smallest camera that I've ever used. And I think if you look at the Fujifilm literature, it actually says it's the smallest camera that they've ever made. Feature number 2, and this is extremely smart, is you can probably see, oh, I'm getting hit by, oh gosh, the Nerf Wars.
It's a great camera.
Feature number 2 is this little guy on the back. And at first, I didn't know what it was, and then I popped it open and I realized that is actually the microphone jack. And the advantage of that is that with some of these smaller cameras, the flip out screen, if you had the microphone jack on the side, would prevent the screen from rotating or block a portion of the screen. So a very smart design decision from Fujifilm. And then you may have noticed that I have another lens for this system. So this is the 10-24, which personally, if I was vlogging, this is like a very comfortable lens because you can go super wide, and then zoom in a little bit if you want to take a more like normal 35mm equivalent focal length photo or video. But Fujifilm has this lens, which is an 8mm, and the nice thing about it is extremely small. So you probably saw in the thumbnail when you clicked on it that the camera kind of looks like it fits in the palm of my hand. And that really is because it does. Oh, what's this? Oh, look, this is what, the 13mm? Oh no, this is the 8mm, okay. So the point with this is that Fuji makes a lot of really small pancake style lenses that are super high quality for the photos or the videos that you're capturing. It really is hard to explain and visualize just how small the Fujifilm X-M5 is. I mean, you don't know the size of my hands, but like it basically is the size of my hand. Or if I get my smartphone and kind of put these two things side by side, like you can see it is basically the size of a smartphone. But I was at an event last weekend and I had this camera literally sitting in my back pocket. I pulled it out and I got an immediate reaction that was like, oh my gosh, that camera is just so cute. Because I think people are so used to seeing big cameras with big grips and all these extra buttons that it really does come as a surprise how compact and small and lightweight Fujifilm was able to make this camera. But let's jump on to our next camera, which is not quite as small, but equally in the small camera budget friendly category, the Lumix S9. This camera has the most professional video features out of the three cameras that I'm showing you. It can shoot in open gate, much like the Fujifilm can. It has the ability to do anamorphic D-squeeze, if that's something that you're interested in. It has the ability to put not one, but two LUTs onto your footage, either as a preview viewing LUT or as a LUT that you can burn in to the video footage and use the app and transfer it directly to your smartphone. But not only that, you can use the Lumix Lab app to create LUTs for yourself. But the idea that a camera manufacturer, a camera company, has that ecosystem fully integrated into the workflow of you shooting photos and videos with this camera is super awesome. I will also say, having edited the log video from each of these cameras, the vlog from Lumix cameras, in my opinion, is the easiest to edit. But in terms of the sensor, this is gonna be a full frame sensor. So you are gonna pay that price premium to jump up from the XM5 to the S9, but the sensor also has in-body image stabilization. So when you open it up and you look at it, not only are you able to add digital stabilization that the Fujifilm and the Canon have, but you have the ability for that sensor to do a little bit of extra work to stabilize your video footage. And I'll show you a side-by-side test in a little bit, but for now, just take my word for it. The image stabilization on the Lumix is really good. And I almost forgot to mention that the Lumix S9 actually uses the same battery that is in the S5 II and the S5 IIX. So these are full-size batteries compared to the other two cameras, which use smaller batteries. And having tested them in real-world shooting scenarios, I have found that the battery in the S9 lasts the longest. But the Canon R8. This is the camera that I recommend if you are interested in photography. And I've actually done a more in-depth review comparing this camera to its bigger brother, the R6 Mark II. And the reason for that is that this camera has the same full-frame sensor that is in that other camera that costs 2 to 3 times as much. So if you're someone who's on a budget, this is actually a really great value because it is currently the least expensive full-frame camera that you can buy. Not only that, but if you take a look at the top, you actually have a full digital smart shoe. The other thing is that it does have a full-size grip. So if you're looking for something that is a little bit nicer in your hand, gives you a little bit more something to hold, the ergonomics on the Canon are gonna be better. Now, this might be biased because I shoot on Canon the most, but I also find the menu system to be the most user-friendly. I have adapted to Lumix. I also find Lumix super user-friendly, and Fuji I've learned because I've had some time shooting on it. But if you need any more proof on the quality of this camera sensor, just go watch any of my YouTube shorts. All of them were either recorded on the R6 or the R6 Mark II, which this video is actually also being recorded on the R6 II, which is the same sensor that is inside this camera. Before we jump into the disadvantages of some of these cameras, I'm gonna show you an image stabilization test while I pay some bills and tell you about the sponsor of today's video. Now imagine for a second, everything just stopped. Kind of feels like something's missing. Maybe it's a little bit awkward, maybe that's okay. But if you're like me and you also like to create videos, you probably want to have those extra layers to add some extra depth to the content that you're making. And in my case, that means adding music and sound effects. And for the last 4 years, I have used Artlist to add that music, to add those extra layers. And because I've been using it for so long, it actually learns and knows what type of music that I use. So when I go on, it has a whole bunch of recommendations. I don't have to go searching. I don't have to go on a deep dive into the depths of the internet to find music that matches what I'm doing. It already knows what I'm gonna do. Sounds a little bit scary, but I promise it's not that scary. But even if you want something that's a little bit more customized, like last week I put a video out on the XM5 and I needed this more like spy, espionage type music that was a little bit mysterious and a little bit undercover, and so I typed in the words of what I felt the music should sound like. And I got recommendations that fit that mood perfectly. But let's say you shot all of your vlog on the XM5 or the Canon R8 and you shot it in log, and so you want that footage to match. Well, now they have their LUTs tab, so you can go in, find a LUT that matches the mood or the feeling or the look that you're going for and apply it to the footage that you got from Artlist or to the footage that you shot on your new Canon R8. And right now, the best deal for Artlist is using my exclusive link for 2 months free off of any annual subscription that you can find linked down in the description. So big thanks to Artlist for continuing to be a supporter of this channel and everything that I do. But every camera comes with disadvantages. So what are the disadvantages with the Fujifilm XM5? As much as the compact size is a benefit, it's also a disadvantage. So I don't have the largest hands, but because it is a smaller camera, like it's hard for me to fit more than like 2 or 3 fingers on this. Like my pinky is never gonna get on this camera. Mind you, I know a lot of third-party companies like SmallRig or these accessory brands will make like adapters or little grips for your cameras. So if you're looking at this camera, maybe check if those types of things are available. The other disadvantage is this on the bottom. I don't know if you can see it. Let me just zoom in. This is where the tripod plate goes in, and it's problematic because it actually blocks the battery/memory card port. So I can't actually get in to change my battery. I have to take the tripod plate off and then change it. And it's a little bit of a process, not my favorite thing to do if you're running and gunning and you're in a high tense vlog scenario and you're like, crap, now I have to stop and change my battery. The other thing I'm not so crazy about is they have a film simulation dial. Now, some people will love this, maybe if you're picking up this camera to do photography, but the whole time I've been shooting with it, I've just kept it, I haven't touched it. And I know there are ways to get creative and maybe use it for photo or video, or if you just want to shoot JPEGs and you don't care about RAW. So if you're the type of photographer who likes that and just wants something straight out of camera, then that may actually be a benefit for you.
If you're a person who does bird photography or wildlife, you're not gonna put on a 500 or 150 to 600 on this because it's just way too heavy. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so that's the other trade-off. Because it is inexpensive, you're not getting like fully waterproof, high quality, like outdoor build quality. If you wanted something like that, well, you'd probably go with like the XT4 or XT5 or GFX. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like it's not gonna have 2 memory cards. There's simply not enough space to have 2 memory cards in a camera that's this small. I think the only way Fujifilm or any other brand could pull it off is if they switch to like a micro SD card as like a second card, but the problem is those cards don't write as fast. And on this camera, which does like 6K video, you do kind of need at least an SD card to get the right speeds that you need to hit like a 100 or 200 megabits per second video bit rate. Okay, so let's jump back to the Lumix S9. And I think the most contentious part of this camera, yes, it's smaller than something like this, which is the S5 IIX, but the price difference between these two cameras is hard to justify. Meaning that if you're someone who has budget, a little bit more budget for the S9, which is the most expensive camera on this list, if you had just a little bit more budget, you could actually jump all the way up to the full-size, fully featured Lumix S5 IIX. Mind you, there's something to be said about paying the convenience fee of getting a smaller camera. But in my eyes, this camera would ideally be maybe like $200, $300 cheaper to put it in line with the Canon R8. And then that way, this would be a much more compelling buy. The other thing is that it does lack a number of in and outs. Meaning, hold on, let me grab this. So the S9 has no headphone jack. It has no hot shoe. So you can't run a flash on here. You can't run any sort of smart accessories. And what's the other and? And it has recording limits. So originally this camera could only record in like 15-minute increments, but the latest firmware did extend that so you could record until the point that you overheat. But the other cameras on this list do have the advantage of being able to record for a little bit longer. However, if you want to fix this camera, you could grab something like this, which is the DJI Mic 2. You could wire this up, much like the microphone that I have on me now, which is the Rode Wireless Pro that is going wirelessly into my camera, wire up the microphone, send it into the camera, and then you have a separate headphone jack on this unit that you could then monitor your audio. I will say, as maybe like a bonus disadvantage, is that the L mount that Lumix uses, there isn't as many vlogging style lenses that I would personally want to use. For example, the L mount isn't as popular as Sony's E mount. And I feel like if I did a more in-depth analysis, it's probably not as popular as the Fujifilm X mount, but I might be wrong in that case. Let me know down in the comments. And then there's the Canon RF mount. And you'll hear a lot of photographers say, oh, there's no budget-friendly options for Canon cameras. But what you're more likely to find is that there are a lot of budget, beginner-friendly, inexpensive options, both from Canon and from Sigma and Tamron, now that they're making lenses for Canon. And then there's a lot at the upper end of the range. There are those L-series lenses with the red rings around them, but then there's not really a lot in between. There are no third-party full-frame lenses, which makes the Canon R8 a little bit more challenging to recommend, but also makes it better as a long-term growth platform. So if you're someone who knows I'm going to be investing in a full-frame camera from now until the end of time, then investing in something like this, getting lenses as you can afford them, and then maybe 2, 3, 5 years down the road, upgrading your body to match all the lenses that you've purchased, well, the Canon makes more sense for that. But because the R8 is a less expensive full-frame option, there is no sensor stabilization. There is no IBIS inside this camera like there is on the Lumix S9. The battery is also smaller. So while the Lumix had a super big battery with more capacity, you're kind of stuck with these small little baby batteries that the R8 is using. They're the same ones that you can get on the APS-C cameras and not the ones that you're going to be getting in an R6 or in a fully featured Canon R5. But if you want to see my full breakdown analysis on comparing something like the Canon R8 to a more fully featured Canon R6 Mark II, you can check out this video right here. So what are the unique standout features that each of these cameras have? Well, the reason you might want to consider the Lumix S9 is the in-body image stabilization and the digital image stabilization that will give you super stable, super smooth handheld footage. Now it also has that full-size battery, and much like the Fujifilm X-M5, both of these cameras have 6K open gate. So if you're interested in shooting social content where you can shoot it horizontally and you have a little bit of extra resolution to crop or reframe after, both of these cameras are going to come with that advantage. But the Fuji does have a full mechanical shutter. It is the only camera on this list that has that feature. Now, the Canon has a mechanical shutter, but it is electronic first curtain only, which means there still is a slight risk that you get some banding when shooting in certain lighting conditions, or you get a little bit of a rolling shutter effect. And if you want to see when that might occur, again, you can check out that comparison video that I did comparing the R6 II to the R8. But the clear advantage of the XM5 is that it is the smallest, lightest, and least expensive option on this list. And personally, if I was someone who was upgrading from an iPhone, I usually like to tell people, unless you have a $1,000-ish budget to spend, I would honestly still shoot on your iPhone or your smartphone. So this camera kind of sits right at that price point where you can get it for less than $1,000 US, probably with a lens, you could get it for right around $1,000. So this might be one that you want to consider. It also is super friendly because it has that vlog mode. If you just want to throw it into that, and then you have all those options right there on your screen. That being said, the Canon interface is also very user-friendly, and the fact that this is a very ergonomic camera gives you a little bit more to hold on to, especially if you're someone who's interested in shooting a lot of photography. And the R8 is the most affordable full frame camera that you can walk into a camera store and buy today. It is the only camera on this list with a fully featured viewfinder, and it can actually shoot the fastest at 40 photos per second in its electronic shutter mode. And if you're looking at video record times, the Canon R8 can also record the longest at 120 minutes without being interrupted. And much like the Lumix S9, both the R8 and the S9 are full frame, fully featured cameras, if you kind of want to think of it like that. So if you're someone who wants to eventually upgrade to an R6, to an R8, to an S5 IIX, to a full frame camera ecosystem, by buying into either of these two, you're kind of already setting yourself up on that path. You can't go wrong with any of these cameras, despite the advantages and the disadvantages of each. My recommendation is figure out what you want to shoot the most. Figure out what is a priority for you, and then see if those priorities line up with any of the advantages or the disadvantages that I've shared. And then when you're ready, go ahead and check out the links down in the description. But maybe there's something that I've missed. Maybe there's a camera that you want to see me review more in depth, or maybe there's a feature of these cameras that I left out. Let me know down in the comments below, and until the next one, grab your camera or grab your smartphone if that's what you're shooting on, get out and go shoot photos.